Hello, viewers of OBN Horn of Africa. Today I'm joining Miss Peninah Achieng from United Kingdom, and she is actually originally from Kenya. And thank you very much for joining me today, Miss Peninah. And it is my pleasure to host you today.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's an honor to be invited.
Let me give you a chance to introduce yourself to my audience.
Thank you. So yes, so my name is Peninah Achieng, and I currently live in the United Kingdom in a city called Bristol. I've been living in Bristol for the last more than 20 years, but I'm originally from Kenya. My parents' ancestral home is in a place called Kisumu. Professionally, I'm an accountant, and I work for the Ministry of Justice as a senior finance business partner. Previous to that, I worked for the National Health Service, and I've also worked for local government since I've been here for more than 20 years. So my passion is very much linked to community activism. I tend to support on a volunteer basis a lot of organizations that are linked to social justice. And I'm also a coach. I'm a mentor. I mentor a lot of young people, and I've been involved in the voluntary sector for more than 15 years. Currently, one of the organizations that I have a lot of involvement with is called African Voices Forum, and that is a forum that brings all Africans, people from the diaspora, specifically from the continent, together to look at issues that concern them. So we have an active board that has representatives from each part of Africa, say the Kenyan Association, Ugandan Association, Nigeria, Ghana, all of those different countries have representatives on there. So I'm very much driven by around ensuring that there's equity in everything. And I'm also very passionate about environmental justice, especially because we know that people from the continent are the people who don't actually contribute very much to the damages that are done to the environment. But yet we are seeing a lot of climate change that is impacting very heavily on our continent. So I'm very passionate about trying to drive some of those issues and being in those spaces where decisions are made which impact on our community here in the UK.
Thank you very much. And let me start with this question. How can you define the African culture, Peninah?
I don't know whether there's such thing as the African culture. I think that there's so many cultures and subcultures, and all of these are driven by different nations. So for instance, when I think about my own culture as a person who is originally from Sudan, or not Sudan, but we traveled along the Nile in order to come and settle in Kenya. And as Luos, we have got different subcultures, and we are driven by different experiences which have shaped and formed our own culture. So there's so many cultures, and it represents a way of living, a way of thinking. It represents our values, it represents our identity, it represents our pride. So culture is in language, it is in so many things, the way that we do things. All of those things define our very, very various cultures. And it's like you're saying, that it is very rich in each of them. And I feel that there's a lot of pride that people take when they appreciate their own culture.
And do you think the African culture are well preserved?
I think that because of the interruption, when I say the interruption, I mean the trafficking of people of African descent that happened 500 years ago. I think that it is sometimes referred to as, where African people were enslaved, but they were typically taken away from the continent, and that's why you now have Africans living everywhere in the world. The people who were in America, in the UK, wherever they ended up. So when that interruption happened, I think that really had a significant impact in our African culture, because our culture was taken away. A lot of the stories that we had or we have been used to were sort of erased. And I think that even though there is still elements of culture, there's still a very big Western influence where people feel that that is a better culture than their own. So even when we are here, you find that children who are growing up outside of the continent, they are more likely to embrace someone else's culture than their own. And so that means that we have lost a lot of our culture along the way. There's some elements of culture that just they're no longer valid. You know, for instance, there are things around female genital mutilation. Some of those elements of culture are probably things which are outdated, if you like, because they were put there for a reason, and those reasons are no longer valid. So there are elements of culture that have just disappeared because they've just become outdated. And you know, polygamy is another one, because now polygamy was very much linked to wealth. But now, as people become to struggle more and women have also become much more independent, there is less and less men who are polygamous. So some of them have just sort of are disappearing. Some of them are disappearing because of the Western influence. Some of them are disappearing because they're just outdated.
The other one is language. As you know, language is a key contributing factor to what is the realization of cultural development everywhere. But paradoxically, here in our continent, the former colonial languages have still got, you know, priority than the indigenous language. If you take, for instance, in Africa, Swahili, which is largely spoken in your country, Kenya, and Uganda, yes, and other countries, even has no room in continental bodies like AU and other organizations. And what do you say on this? Why this is so?
I think that is probably I have to say that in Kenya, Swahili has taken more of a center stage, because even if you listen to our most of our radio stations, they're mainly now using Swahili as the main communicating language. If you're in the villages, again, people tend to use indigenous languages, whatever their languages are. So I recently went home, and that whole time, because I was spending lots of time with my parents, so automatically with them I speak our indigenous language. With my brothers, I tend to speak Swahili more, just because that was just the way that we always communicated. So although Swahili has changed a lot in terms of the fact that it now has a lot of English intertwined with it. So it is referred to as Sheng. So there's Swahili and then there's English. So in a sense, it's now called Sheng, because all of those words are in. So when someone talks in Swahili, I say, unakam. So that means, you know, they tend to use that more. And now it's become so commonplace that even in adverts, if you're going if you're going into town, you'll see a lot of adverts that are written in that way. And, you know, it is encouraged. And I think that is why sometimes language also evolves. You know, Swahili has evolved in different ways in different places. In places like Zanzibar, in places like Tanzania, you find that they have still maintained the Swahili as it is. We call it clean Swahili, because it's not been mixed with anything. That's just the way that they've never mixed it up with anything. But in Kenya, it has been mixed up a lot. And I think maybe that is just society moving on and evolving and then reclaiming. So by mixing it, they have reclaimed their own language, but they've also intertwined it with something else. So I think language is interesting because it also defines us a lot. So I think that when you're in a place where you've got people who you can interact with in a different language, it gives you a different sense of pride. So I think that language is so, so important. But the young people that are growing up now don't really appreciate it. And I think that maybe the parents have sort of not really encouraged them to speak the indigenous language. So they tend to speak either in English or Swahili.
And how should Africa as a continent, especially the AU, which is a huge organization, continental organization, invest on indigenous languages?
Yeah, and they should. I think that they should, because technically, those are some of the impact of colonialism and slavery. It has left its mark in very, very many places. And even though many parts of Africa have tried to reclaim some of their own, you know, if you go into some cities where they've changed the names of those cities because originally those cities were named by what were by the colonizers, they've tried to reclaim that. But I think that the AU can actually take the lead by adopting indigenous languages, a common one, you know, like Swahili, for instance. That one is spoken much more widely and in many places. So although in other areas, I'm not sure whether there's other common languages that they can use, but I think that they can capitalize on that and, you know, use that as a language which is championed, so that they're seen as taking some kind of leadership in those kind of areas to revive and to promote the African culture. Africa has been used and continues to be used for its resources. So anything that is done to protect the resources of Africa, I think, has to be something that is going to benefit the continent. In terms of the implementation, I think that there's a significant challenge in the leadership that we have in African countries, which must play a significant role, because there are people who benefit from the chaos that is in Africa. And therefore, if you haven't got the right leadership in a specific country that is actively going to work towards implementing some of these key things, which might involve also tackling corruption, because when you're talking about resources, we also talk about corruption, because resources and corruption go together. When you let people come into your country and then they take from you, then there's elements of corruption that can also be, that can follow through. And therefore, if the people are not benefiting from that, then very clearly, there's always those leaders who sometimes benefit from that. So those leaders are the ones that are either going to stop the implementation because it doesn't benefit them. In a sense, that is a significant challenge. Getting the right leaders to implement, I think, is a big challenge, because most of those leaders are self-centered. They are only there for themselves. They don't think about the common person. They don't think about the challenges and the struggles that people have. They don't think about the development of the nations in the way that they should. I mean, I have to say that not all of them, some of them are being implemented. I was quite surprised when I went to Kenya recently. Again, I noticed that there was so much infrastructure being built across the big cities, like in Mombasa, in Nairobi, in Kisumu. So there's all sorts of, the infrastructure means they're building better roads. They're looking at ways in which they can have smarter transport. All of those things which can be seen as developmental. But technically, we have also seen that some of those things in the West have created problems. So when you're only copying what someone else has done because you think that that is development, that is also another challenge, because you think, oh, if we have 20 roads cutting across each other, that is development. Well, actually, what you're doing is you're now going to increase pollution, and you're going to increase, pollution leads to lots of bad air, and we are already degrading the environment. So I think it is about really being careful about what we are copying from and who from, and what does development mean from an African perspective, not just saying, oh, they've got that and they're a developed nation, so let's also have the same. So I think it is getting that mindset of implementing things in a way that from an African perspective, that is suitable for Africans, but also changing the leadership so that we have leaders who are straightforward and who can implement some of those changes.
You know, integration of African countries in different aspects is also highly needed. You know, for instance, if you take your country, Kenya and Ethiopia, they have a relationship, economic integration, and also political integration. And if you take Safaricom is coming to Ethiopia as a competent organization, and there is also a road corridor between Ethiopia, Mombasa, Moyale, and Mombasa road corridor inaugurated a year ago, where President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed, participated in that process. And what do you say about the integration of African countries, taking these two countries example?
I think that it is long overdue, and I think sometimes we go forward and then we go back again, because yesterday my brother applied for his Kenyan passport. The passport that is now received is called an East African Community Passport. So now my father used to work for the East African Community Passport 50 years ago. So we've gone full circle. So we sort of removed ourselves, but now we are seeing that it is important to become more united together. Look at what's happening in Ukraine. Look at what the reasons why that war is going on. Is also linked to power, because you've got nations who have come together to fight for what they feel is actually theirs. So you can see that we also say that when you're more united, you become more powerful. You are able to control your resources, and therefore you can actually benefit more when there is more of you coming together on common grounds and common goals than if you're going it alone. So I think we've got a saying that says the person who goes a journey by themselves might have a long way to go, but actually if you're with other people, the journey might seem much more shorter.
The other thing is youth should be encouraged, I think, that way. And there are many youth associations across the world, African Youth Association across the world, and it is youth also who demand, changes, and I mean transformation, political, economical, and cultural transformation. And how should African leaders support the youth so as to achieve the desired goal?
Well, the youth they are our future, because we've got something called age, and when you're aging, then you have to think about succession planning. Succession planning is about building up young people who become our future leaders, who have got the right values, who are much more oriented towards change which benefits people. It isn't enough to emulate leadership which has not really benefited the continent. So we need our young people to have different leadership skills which are more orientated towards developing the continent. And of course they are the future. Nobody stays in power forever, because either something's going to happen, at some point people have to step back because you've done your bit and you've aged, and you have to give way for that next generation to take their role. So it is a very important thing, and that's why for myself I also mentor young people. I'm part of the Prince's Trust here in the UK, and the Prince's Trust has young people who sometimes are referred to them because they've got different challenges in their lives. Maybe they're unemployed, maybe they have mental health issues. So the role that I play in mentoring those young people is to be able to give them some support, to give them hope, to ensure that they can actually carve a journey for themselves and to help them along that journey. So I think that mentoring young people is very, very important, and it's key. Young people are very passionate too, and having the space that they want in order to talk about things that matter to them. One of the projects that African Voices Forum is doing, we've got some funding to lift the voices of young people, because a lot of African young men, or even young women, their voices are never heard in the mainstream. So we want to develop a platform and a space where they can come and talk about their things, and we can lift their voices so that their voices are also heard when decisions are being made which impact on them.
Thank you very much. And let me also forward this question. And African history has been told by others for centuries, and especially those who are been subjugating the continent, still want to tell us what Africa is and who Africans are. And my question is, how long this will continue? Why not, if you take, for instance, international media, they are still, presenting the image of the country as if it is a dark continent. But in reality, we are not. You are African, for instance, and you are serving the world.
Yes.
Why the international medias are still, presenting Africa as if it is a dark continent?
I think it is because it serves their interest. It always serves someone's interest. When you portray a negative image of something, it's because of the interest that you have. In that dark continent, it is the same continent where resources are consistently, if that dark continent did not exist, where would they be? Who would they, Africa has been there. They have gone and, they've sort of developed themselves and they've got nothing left to do now apart from, but Africa still has a lot going for it. It continues to thrive irrespective of all these negative things that are said about it. And I think it is about challenging those every time that you see someone who's giving you a very negative picture of the continent, it's about you calling them out and, using any opportunity that you can to actually show, to stamp it out, because the media is quite powerful in a sense, because people often tend to believe the media. But we are at an age where actually we have got other means of challenging the media. We've got social media platforms now. So if someone is saying something, you can actually challenge them back and say, actually, that's not true. This is also part of it. There's no place on this earth which hasn't got a negative and a positive. All of those two things are always it is in our lives, it is in everything that we do. So even in these other developed nations where they always show a positive picture, there's also a negative picture. But obviously it serves them to show Africa in the light in which it is shown, because it serves them to continue to take from Africa.
And finally, African diaspora has an enormous role in promoting the continent, and media has the same role, has a greater role, in promoting and defending the continent. And what these two, the media and the African diaspora, should do in promoting, strengthening the solidarity among African people, and as well as defending the continent. Thank you.
Yeah, the Africans who are living in the diaspora definitely have got a role. They can play a significant role in highlighting, and most of the time also sharing. What we do with the African Voices Forum is we also have a newsletter where we talk about our culture. So everybody writes a piece about, what are the key things that Nigerians, depending on which part, we discuss those very positive aspects, whether it is language, whatever it is, customs, our rituals, all our practices. We showcase them in this newsletter, and this newsletter is something that we do every quarter. So we often try and use those opportunities to make sure that we are promoting the continent in the way that we want, because I think that we are very proud that is our land, that is where we come from. Everybody has a level of pride from where they come from. So I think our role is so key in always putting Africa out there and showing it in a very positive light. So, and we are doing that in African Voices Forum. In terms of the media, I think that they have an even greater role, but it also depends on who's funding that media, I suppose. If you've got people like the BBC who sometimes have got correspondents in different parts of Africa, they have to dance to the tune of the funder, and therefore sometimes they will give that very negative picture. So I think it depends on who's funding them, and that sort of sometimes overrides what they want to showcase or what they do not want to showcase. But they have considerable influence. So it means that if they can use their power in the positive way, they can definitely turn some of these things on their heads. So yes, of course we do.
I say this is my final question, but you reminded me one thing, and Africa, this is my final actually. And Africa has been, suffering from a brain drain. Most African intellectuals are not serving the continent. This is not my opinion. It is, there are many intellectuals who are raising this issue. And what do you say? Even, scientists, there are scientists, African scientists who are serving, other countries. How long this will continue?
I don't know how long it is going to continue, but I do think that there is a lot of move now from where people are actually moving back to the continent. And I do know that even people who were not born in the continent, for instance, Ghana has opened its doors to the diaspora community, people who were, taken away from the continent, people who were from Caribbean.
If you can also raise the cause, why people are moving out of the continent?
People are moving back into the continent. That's from my perspective.
Yeah, but before that, why some African are,
yeah, I think people move because of economic status, because people are looking to, people want to sort of live a better life sometimes, and there is that it's not a myth, but sometimes people think that actually life here is way better than life there. But I think it is because of the definitions of how people view life, because if you're told that, if you've got all of these things, then you're better off, but actually it brings other problems. So I think it is also people thinking that, the grass is greener somewhere else. Only when you go there, you find out that it isn't as green as you thought it was. So I think that, there's various things which drives people. Conflict is another one. We've seen lots of conflict in places like Somalia, where, all of that conflict has driven a lot of people out of the country because they were escaping from that. So there are things, even drought can be something that, all of these environmental changes are going to create refugees who are going to be trying to run away so that they can go and find somewhere where they can live. But I think mainly people, in the past, people have often moved because of the economic gain that people might perceive to be elsewhere. So that means that, of course, the continent has been robbed of of people where people have got some level of expertise. But I also think that people from the diaspora are now moving back into the continent, and even people who've never lived in the continent are finding homes. They're being invited to different African countries to come and put claim to their, to where their ancestors were born. So the picture is changing. The picture is changing. But we can only say with time, because of the way that we view time. For us, time can be long, but actually sometimes it's only a moment. Because if you think about the fact that if you can remember everything that you did when you were 7 or 8 years, and yet you're thinking, where has the time gone? So time tells.
Finally, if you have any message to my audience, you are welcome.
Yeah. I think I just want to pass on a message to say, we should continue to fight for our continent. We should be proud of our continent. We should be proud of our culture. We've got a lot of challenges in Africa, but Africa also thrives on chaos. So we must never lose hope at all. And I think that consistent fighting and being able to support and show the continent in a positive light has to be something that we do every day, and we have to continue to shout so that we have better leaders. Really, if you've got a leader who does not serve the country, we should try and make sure that we are not giving them the opportunity to continue to ruin the continent.
Peninah Achieng from United Kingdom, thank you very much for your analysis, and we appreciate it. Keep in touch.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear viewers of OBN Horn of Africa, this is all about our discussion with Peninah Achieng from United Kingdom, originally from Kenya. Till next edition, goodbye.